So we've got adventurer, author and speaker James Ketchell with us this evening to tell us about his next challenge, which he considers to be his biggest challenge to date, to sail solo around the world and become the first person to circumnavigate the globe, not only by land and by air, but now by sea. From Premier's point of view, we hope his story will appeal to all of you, not only because he too is preparing his boat for his 2024 adventure, but because of the journey that's brought him here, taking on the challenges that the rowing, climbing, cycling, flying, and life in general throws at you. His purpose is to inspire young people to pursue their own goals and dreams, and now he will tell you all about it. Over to you, James.
Thank you for the extremely kind introduction, Amy. I really appreciate that. And yeah, sorry, we're a little bit late this evening starting, guys. But what we're going to do, as Amy said, I've had various different adventures. I've had some ups and I've had some downs, and I'm effectively going to share my story with you this evening. Sort of the first 35 minutes of what I'm talking about will have nothing to do with sailing, but we'll get on to that. I just thought I'd build a bit of a picture as to who I am, what I've been up to, what I'm doing, and what I'm currently working on. So I'll share my screen with you guys. But we finally got there. All right, guys. So for me, the journey really begins 15 years ago. I used to race bikes. This is me. I had a Kawasaki ZX6 Ninja. It's quite a fast bike, actually. It would max out at about 170 miles an hour. So it's pretty quick. I race most weekends. This is what I really enjoyed doing. And I was quite competitive. I always wanted to win. But I'll tell you one thing, it doesn't matter who you are, because no one wins all the time. And when you're on two wheels and you want to win all the time, often one of two things will happen. You'll either win or you'll crash trying. And unfortunately, I used to crash quite a bit. But luckily, that's okay. You wear this leather suit here. So the idea is when you slide along the tarmac, it stops you from losing all your skin, which is very, very useful. But one particular time, I was in second place. I was chasing someone. As I came out the corner, the bike was leant over, very similar to what you can see there. And as I came out the corner, I opened up the throttle and I just put a little bit too much power down. I was in third gear, bouncing off the rev limiter at nearly 16,000 RPM. I shifted up into fourth gear and the rear wheel just lit up. It span up and the back of the bike came round on me and it threw me over the top of the handlebars. It's called a high side. But unfortunately, when the human body hits concrete at just over 100 miles an hour, I was traveling at 120 miles an hour as I exited the corner. It doesn't always end well. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember flying through the air, looking back at the bike. And I had one thought going through my head, and I thought to myself, oh dear, this is going to hurt. I was knocked out unconscious, and then I remember sort of waking up and a doctor come running over to me and he said, are you okay? I was like, my leg really hurts. And I'll never forget this. He looked down and he just sort of paused and he went, ooh. And when a doctor does that, it's never a good sign. He looked back up into my eyes and he said to me, whatever you do, don't look down. So of course I looked down immediately. And instead of my right foot pointing forwards, I'd snapped my ankle and it was pointing the wrong way, and it all just hurt that little bit more looking at it. I was quite pleased. I felt like I had a sense of humor in the face of adversity. The doctor, he slid the boot off, was more of a track marshal kind of medic. And I remember I had an open fracture, so the skin had split, bone was sticking out, and it was bleeding heavily. And when I looked at it, the first thing that came into my mind, I said to the guy, wow, have you got a camera? Wouldn't that make a great photo? And I'll never forget, he said to me, stop being such a silly boy. And I said, okay, I'm sorry. And after that, he started injecting morphine into me, which is incredible. You drift away into another world. And then after that, you're not going to remember much. So I hadn't just snapped my ankle. I'd broken both my legs, broken my arm, my hand, and I fractured my lower back. So this was a little bit of a problem. When I arrived at hospital, the doctors were very quick to tell me that this was quite a serious injury and they didn't know what the outcome of my recovery was going to look like. in terms of the back recovery and being able to walk properly again. And it's funny because you only realize what you have when you don't have it anymore. That's the first sort of thing that sprang to my mind. You know, you take it for granted being able to get up and walk around, but the second you can't do that, you'll realize just how useful it actually is. And I thought, well, I can't turn time back. You know, it's happened, so there's no point in sort of feeling sorry for myself. I've got to try and turn something negative into something positive. And I had a goal ever since I was a child, like a teenager. I read about these two guys who rowed a boat across the Atlantic Ocean, and I just couldn't get that idea out of my head. I'd never rowed a boat before. I knew nothing about rowing, knew nothing about boats. I just craved this adventure, this idea that rowing across the Atlantic was going to be great. And for many years, I looked into it. But when I was younger, into my late teens, even into my early 20s, I didn't have a huge amount of confidence. I was very shy. I was very quiet. And I worried a lot about what other people thought of me. And if there was a reason not to do something, I would find it, despite wanting to. I had a lot of demons, I suppose, that kind of held me back. But now I was a little bit older, and I was faced with this prospect of just lying there, completely smashed to pieces. It was almost like a light switch moment. I decided I was going to row a boat across the Atlantic. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I knew what I wanted to do, and that was the important part. So 2 years later, it took nearly a year to recover. I did go on to row across the Atlantic. It doesn't look like me. My hair goes blonde and my beard goes bright ginger, but we all know that ginger's cool. There's probably a few ginger people on this call, I suspect. That's actually Antigua in the background, in the Caribbean. And so that's where I finished, but I started from a little island called La Gomera. You typically would do this as a two-person team or four-person, sometimes even up to 10. And I really wanted to do this with someone else. But for some reason, no one wanted to do it with me. So I had no choice but to do it on my own. It was probably the best decision I ever made. I'll show you a little bit of video footage, guys. This is pretty much a standard day out there. You see the way the boat's moving around, but you get used to it after a while. You don't realize it's moving so much, and it becomes completely normal. So I think the thing that really took me back is I thought this was going to be really, really hard. And I'll never forget, I was at the start in La Gomera in the Canaries, and it was a particularly rough day. I hadn't quite set off, and the winds were blowing hard, and the waves were smashing up against the marina wall. And all of a sudden, I was now out of my comfort zone. I had to do it. Whereas when I made the decision to do this, I was in my comfort zone. Not comfort zone, but because I was in hospital. But I had people around me that I was familiar with. So everything seems like a good idea when you're in a comfortable environment. And I never forget, I thought to myself, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And I got chatting to a guy in a bar that night. And this guy had sailed around the world a few times. And he said, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm really nervous." And he said to me, "All you have to do is get through the first 3 days. If you can get through the first 3 days, the rest will be easy." He said, "It's all mental. It's all in your mind." And when I left, it's really bizarre. All I wanted to do was to get to that 3-day mark. I didn't have a goal of getting beyond that, because I thought, if I can get to 3 days, I know it's then all in my mind and I can do this. And I got out there and I got through those first 3 days, which were the hardest. They're the hardest because the reality hits you of the scale of what it is you're trying to do. And you start looking for ways to get out of it, maybe without losing face. And your mind is just on overdrive. And you have to stay calm and composed and just focus on getting through those first 3 days. And everything gets easier after that. And when I got to the halfway point, it just got easier, to be honest. And probably after a couple of weeks out there, I had this realization that all those years I wanted to row this boat across the Atlantic, but I didn't think I was capable of doing it. It turns out I would have been completely capable of doing it. And rowing across the Atlantic really taught me to never, ever be afraid of trying new things. When you think something's going to be hard, it is often not as hard as you think, and is often more doable. And actually, it was incredible. I was jinxed with bad weather the year I went across in 2010. There was a lot of areas of low pressure, which was switching the wind direction. So I was getting blown back a lot of the time. And it should have taken about 70 or 80 days maximum, but it ended up taking 110 days, 4 hours and 4 minutes. Not that I was counting, right? But I got across and I just took it one day at a time. And it was incredible out there. The wildlife was amazing. It really just blew my mind. And a lot of people asked me like what I thought about and how did I survive out there. And actually, this has got nothing. This is purely a mental challenge. It might sound daft, but in my opinion, this is not a physical challenge at all. At no point was my heart rate elevated when I was rowing that boat. You're just tapping the oars. You're surviving the environment, and you've got to learn to thrive in it, and you've got to learn to want to be there and enjoy it. And actually, at this moment here, I'm about to row into English Harbour in Antigua. I guess some of you may have been here. And actually, if you look, I'm about to take the last stroke of a 3,000-mile row. If you watch what happens now on to the gate that holds the oar in place, you'll see it snaps on the last stroke of a 3,000-mile row. So what are the chances of that? I mean, I had a spare, but I didn't need it, of course. And my mum and dad were due to be here, but their flight was cancelled. So I didn't know anyone here, and I hadn't seen anyone in nearly 4 months. But the word got out that this British lunatic was coming in, and a few people turned up to see me. If you keep watching, something quite funny happens, and no, I don't fall in. It turns out that champagne in the face is pretty painful, guys, especially when it goes in your eyes. It really stings. You're much better off drinking it than you are spraying it in your face. But here it is, and somehow I'd managed to row 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. And it was really funny because I didn't want it to end. This is effectively what the boat looks like. I spent the whole time thinking about wanting to finish and what it was going to be like. But then when I got to within 24 hours of Antigua, the first thing that I knew where Antigua was because I could see it on the chart plotter, and I saw this red flashing light on the horizon, which was a radio mast. And other people who'd either sailed to Antigua or rowed there, they said to me, "Oh, you'll see Antigua 60 miles out," which is an absolute load of nonsense. If you're on top of a QE2, maybe, but when you're 4 feet above the water, you will not see Antigua until you're 20, 30 miles away. And so I saw a red light flashing. It was a radio mast. And I kind of knew that I'd made it. And it was really strange. I didn't want it to finish. I wanted to just keep going. And I spent a lot of my time out in the Atlantic, like wishing it away, rowing as hard as I could, just wanting to get to the finish. And then when I finished, I thought, you know what, I should have. One of the things I learned off the back of rowing the Atlantic was actually you've got to enjoy the process of doing something. It's not necessarily about the end goal. Like being out there was incredible. The wildlife that I saw, oceanic white-tip sharks, dolphins, just giant turtles. I was hit in the face by a flying fish, which is quite a common occurrence when you're very low. So it's quite normal to be hit in the face by a fish. And it was just incredible. And this was all I ever wanted to do. I had a real job at this point, and I was very kindly given a sabbatical to go and do this. But I didn't expect to happen what happened off the back of this. Off the back of rowing across the Atlantic, a door of opportunity opened up. And I do a lot of work with kids, and I say to them that when you do something you've not done before, doors of opportunity will naturally open for you, right? There's got to be an action to get a reaction. And off the back of doing this, I ended up meeting someone who became a really good friend of mine. His name was Rob, and he was a very accomplished high altitude climber. He'd been to the summit of Everest 5 times. And he asked me if I wanted to go out to Everest with him to climb the mountain. And I said, Rob, I don't think I can. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, I believe that you can. And I kind of reflected on this situation that I was in. And I thought, you know what? I thought rowing across the Atlantic was going to be nigh on impossible, but it really wasn't that difficult, in my opinion. You're cold sometimes at night and tired and hungry, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I thought, you know what? I'll regret this decision for the rest of my life if I don't take this opportunity that was in front of me. If I can't get to the top, then so be it. I can look back and say that I tried, but I don't want that feeling of regret and always be left wondering, what if had I taken that opportunity? So I made a decision that I was going to climb Everest. And in order to do that, I needed more time off. So you don't want to see the look on and what my boss told me when I said to him that I needed a little bit more time off. But he was a great man, and he said to me, "Do you know what, James? Don't worry about the job. Just go. You'll get another job. You will not get this opportunity again." And so this was the hard part. I had to raise the funds to get out to Everest. This boat was put in a big container and shipped back to the UK. Luckily, I managed to sell it to some other lunatic to pay off the loan. And I was kind of back to square one. And I couldn't turn to my parents to give me any money to go to Everest because they didn't have any. So I had to completely start again. So I started writing proposals to companies. I was raising money for a charity that looked after very poorly kids. And I thought I had the credibility that I just rode across the Atlantic. So why wouldn't someone want to help me? I was completely wrong. It was extremely difficult. People wanted to talk to me and ask me questions about what it was like to row across the Atlantic. But when it came to me asking the question, could they help fund the trip to Everest? It was like, nah, we can't. And it actually became really demoralizing. But every time someone said no, I just sent another email. I made another telephone call. And I just made the decision that I was never, ever, ever going to give up. And that paid off because one day I had a lucky break. I got talking to a guy. I was on the phone. I'll tell you how it happened. I was on the phone to this guy for nearly 2 hours. He worked for a company called Ben Sherman that make all shirts. And he said to me, he was asking all the right questions. Where's the money going to go? What do we get for our money? How are you going to promote us? I spent 2 hours talking to this guy. And then at the end of it, he said to me, "Oh, I've got to go now. We can't give you any money. I was just interested." And I thought, bloody hell, I just wasted like 2 hours and I was really annoyed. But I deliberately didn't say what I wanted to say because I'd learned in the past that if you act on emotion and sometimes act on your feelings, that can not always lead to the right outcomes. So I didn't say what I wanted to say, and it was a good job I didn't, because he said to me just before he left, "Hey, I've got this spreadsheet and you can have it. And all the people in these spreadsheets, they run companies, they're marketing directors, they're CEOs. Why don't you email all of them? Don't tell them where you got their info from, and see how you get on." Now, this was before all this GDPR nonsense. You can't actually do that now. People's data is quite important and they're protective over it. So I got all these different email addresses. I started emailing all these different people and I didn't get anywhere until it was the last one. And I remember the day I sent this email, and I sent it to a guy who was the marketing director for a company called Nando's. Right? They make great chicken burgers, but I didn't see the connection between Nando's and me climbing Everest. And I just thought, what a waste of time. No one's going to help me. No one has this far. And I kind of became quite negative. But I thought to myself, well, if I don't send this email, nothing's going to happen. So I sent this email. Unbelievably, my phone rings half an hour later, and it's this guy, Andrew. He says, "James," these were his exact words, by the way. He said, "James, it's Andrew from Nando's here. I'm reading your email and I think it's bloody brilliant. But tell me one thing. Do you actually eat Nando's?" So I paused, of course, and said, yes, of course I do. Every day I go to Nando's for lunch, and it costs me a fortune. And I happen to joke that I can only eat lemon and herb. I can't eat anything spicy. And the guy found that funny, and he said, okay, so you've rode the Atlantic and you're going out to climb Everest, and you're telling me you can't eat our hot chicken. And I said, yeah, that's true. And he said, that's an incredible story. I went to meet this guy, and 24 hours later, unbelievably, Nando's gave me the money I needed to climb Mount Everest. And the day I sent that email was the day I was feeling so low and just couldn't be bothered. And I say this to kids, and I try to reinforce this to young people, that if you only do things when you feel like doing them, you're not really going to go that far. And if you can start developing the ability when you're young to do things when you don't feel like doing it, that's often the difference between people who are doing well in life and people who are not. You know, if you only do things when you feel like doing it, you're really not going to get that far. And that was a real eye opener and a real lesson for me moving forward. So I got the money. Unbelievably, I only had a couple of weeks spare to get out to Everest. And a lot of people ask me how you go about climbing it. You can climb from two sides, the south side via Nepal or the north side via Tibet. I climb from the south side, and this is how you will go about doing it. You've got base camp, then you've got camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, and then you have the summit. But we have to go through a series of acclimatization climbs. So we go from base camp up to camp 1, then down to base camp, then up to camp 2, then back down to base camp, then up to camp 2, then up to camp 3, and then from camp 3 we come all the way back down. And you're probably thinking, why would you do that? And that's to allow our bodies to adjust to the lower levels of oxygen as we go higher. And once we've been up to camp 3, we're then ready to go back up, and we'll go all the way to the top. So people don't realize it's a drawn out 6-week process to stand on top of the world's highest mountain. I'll take you on a quick tour, guys. So actually the most dangerous part is lower down. It's the Khumbu Icefall. It's this whole mass of ice that's moving and shifting. And of course, it opens up these huge gaping holes, which you have to get across on, you know, the Sherpas put the ladders down, and you're out of your comfort zone to begin with. You're nervous. It's not a good idea to look down, as you can see. And some of these ladders get quite long, like this one here. And of course, only one person could go across this at one time, and you're very, very nervous, and everyone is watching you. And of course, I had to go across this ladder not once, but 5 times, because you're going up and down. But these ladders taught me something. And that was, if you can control if you can control your emotions when you're scared, when you're nervous, when you're anxious, when you're out of your comfort zone, if you can develop that ability to stay calm, that staying calm will really stand you in good stead. It certainly stood me in good stead. And actually, the first time I went across this, I was very nervous. I was out of my comfort zone. But then by the time I went across this ladder, by the 3rd or 4th time, I was going across this like it was nothing. And I say to kids that if you want to get better at something, all you have to do is do it. Just do more of that thing, and you will get better. So yeah, this was lower down actually. But no one would be able to climb Everest if it wasn't for these guys, the team that make it happen. These are the local Nepali people, the Sherpas and the porters that live high up in the villages. They've been born there their whole life. They work here doing this type of work, and they're incredible. They often, until recently, they've never really got enough credit for what they do, because if it wasn't for these people, there's very few people, if any, who could go out to Mount Everest without their support and stand on top of the world. It just doesn't happen. Like, you cannot climb high mountains without these people. They are amazing. As you go higher, you're using supplementary oxygen. This makes it just that little bit easier, because once you go above 8,000 meters, you're no longer acclimatizing. Your body is slowly dying. And so you can stay up there for about, depending on the individual, about 24 to 48 hours. And after that, you'll die. So you can't stay up there long. You climb through the night from Camp 4 up to the summit, and you do that so you can arrive in the morning when the sun's coming up, and you can get back down in the daylight. And if we were all to stand on top of Mount Everest right now, this is what we would see. You're looking south out over Nepal. India is in the distance. And now here's the really interesting thing. For me, it wasn't this hooray, hoorah moment when I stood on top of the world. I knew where I was, but I was extremely fatigued and extremely tired. And you are only halfway when you are stood on top of the world. Most accidents happen on the way back down. And so I took a few pictures. I had to get that picture with the bloody Nando's flag. I got it done. And then I took my own photo. This is my best photo. I have this in my house, and it doesn't look like me. I look like Darth Vader out of Star Wars. But just to prove it's me, the ginger beard comes back, and I was 29 years old in this photo, but I look like I'm 59 years old. Not that there's anything wrong with 59, of course, but I was looking a little haggard and a little older than I actually was. Things started to go wrong for me on the way back down. I didn't know, but I had quite a nasty lung infection, and it usually takes about 2 days to get from the summit of Everest back down to base camp, but it took me 4 days to get down. I was in a very, very, very bad way. And if it wasn't for my Sherpa, I probably wouldn't be here now. And when I got home, I was taken straight to hospital, and I had pneumonia. So I ended up descending Mount Everest with pneumonia, which was incredibly difficult. It was physically the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But it taught me something. And that was, I'll never forget it. I was descending Mount Everest. I was trying not to panic because you feel like you're suffocating. And so you have to keep stopping to catch your breath, but you can never catch your breath. You're constantly out of breath. And it's hard to not panic. But I said to myself a couple of things: stay calm and keep moving. And you know what? It was that concept of keep moving that saved my life and got me back down. Because whenever you sort of hit a bit of a wall physically and mentally, you just want to stop. But had I have stopped, if Dorji wasn't there, what happens is you're so tired, you're so fatigued that you would just fall asleep, and that would be you gone. You'd freeze, you'd run out of oxygen, and that would be it. And there's no shadow of a doubt that for me, that concept to just keep moving saved my life. And I will tell you one thing: when you think you are physically at your limit and you cannot go anymore, I can absolutely tell you that you're only at about 50% of what you're truly capable of doing before you drop down and collapse. Your mind, your body will take you so much further than you think. It will always be your mind that stops you. Your body is an incredible thing. And I kind of realized that as over those few days descending Mount Everest. And when I got back, I was sent to hospital, and I spent 2 weeks in hospital with the lung infection. And it was almost like a feeling of deja vu, sort of having been in this hospital before. But I was at a bit of a crossroads in my life. People were saying to me, it's time to grow up now, time to go back to the real world. You've had fun. But I never really knew what I wanted to do when I was young. I was in and out of jobs. I was never settled. But fast forward a bit of time, and here I was. Although I was lying in hospital, I felt alive. I felt incredible. I felt like all of a sudden, after nearly 30 years of being alive, I felt like I'd finally found my purpose and my passion and something I enjoy. I started being asked to give talks to kids in schools, and it just sort of took off. And I thought, you know what? I don't really know where this is going to go, but I want to do some more of this because it makes me feel happy and it feels right. So I was going to, I decided that I was going to cycle around the world. And so I set off. All my friends joined me on the first day, and they quickly cleared off after that. And I was left on my own, cycled through northern France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Czech Republic, Poland, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, into India. That's the bike that I used. I was traveling on my own. I was unsupported. So that means no one's following me in a car, fixing the bike or buying me McDonald's when I was hungry. I had to do all that myself. And that's all that I carried for half a year to get around the world. That's what the middle of Australia looks like. There's only one road to get across. So you'd have to be pretty stupid to get lost. You just keep going. And something quite interesting, a lot of people said to me, do not cycle across that road. It's the most dangerous place you could ever be. And the interesting thing is, those people that were saying that had never actually been here, right? And when I got out there, it wasn't. It was great. The truck drive, there are huge road trains, but they pull right over. They give you loads of room. You know, I had people pulling over almost every day saying, wow, like, what are you doing? Can I help you? Do you want food? Do you want water? Do you want a lift? And I had to explain that defeats the object of cycling around the world. But there was a real feeling of sort of camaraderie crossing the Nullarbor Plain. It was amazing. And it taught me something very valuable. And that is, if you're going to take advice from someone, just be mindful that they are qualified to give you that advice. Have they done what it is that you want to do? Have they been where it is that you're going? Because, you know, I've learned over the years, people are very good at giving advice. You just have to be clever in working out who you take advice from sometimes. After that, headed over to America. You need to eat a lot of food when you're cycling around the world. That wasn't a problem in America. I won an eating competition. The guy couldn't believe where I was putting the food, but I was burning 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. So it was no problem for me. I actually cracked my tooth though in Texas. I needed to have a dentist sort it out. I found a dentist and he repaired my tooth for me. And actually he did it free of charge. It was going to be $1,000. And I was incredibly grateful for that. And when I cycled around the world, I realized something. There are so many kind people out there. It didn't matter what country I was passing through. It didn't matter what language they spoke. It didn't matter what skin color they had. So many people were so good to me when I cycled around the world that I'll be playing forward favors for the rest of my life. And that dentist, he said to me, you don't need to pay me. Just pass this favor forward. And it was incredible. And this is what a dentist looks like. And it's very difficult smiling, by the way, when half your teeth have just been drilled. You'll see there. I carried on after that, and 6 weeks later, I arrived home and I'd cycled around the world. And an opportunity came my way after this. Someone that I knew got in contact with me, and he asked me if I would row a boat across the Indian Ocean with him. And in the beginning, I was a little bit busy, and I said, you know what? I'm not sure. But what really impressed me about this guy was the fact that he just took himself off and he was doing it. Because it's very easy to talk about something, but it's different doing it. He started learning how to row. He built a website. He put himself out there and said, this is what I'm going to do. And he was seeking funding, and it kind of got my attention. And it turns out he had a pretty impressive story himself. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer. He nearly died when he was 19 years old. And all he wanted to do is prove to people that you can do things if you want to do them. And so I decided that I would do it with him, and it just felt right. So the Indian Ocean is a different beast to the Atlantic. It's 4,000 miles. So it's an additional 1,000 miles. You do have prevailing winds, but it's much more volatile. If you cross the Atlantic at the right time of year, I'm sure many of you on this call have, it's relatively straightforward. It's completely downwind. You're never going to get huge winds at the right time of year. I certainly didn't when I was doing it. It's a fairly safe, easy route. But the Indian Ocean's different. It's changeable, it's volatile, and you will get caught in bad weather. And unfortunately, we did get caught in some bad weather. There's Ash in the picture there. We were almost halfway across the Indian Ocean. Everything was going great until our boat capsized and Ash sustained an injury and we had to be rescued. So that's me climbing up the side of a 100,000 ton crude oil tanker, like the length of sort of 4 football pitches. And it was probably the scariest situation I've ever been in my life. Luckily, the main thing, Ash was okay, so we were good there. That was the priority. But then for me, I was extremely disappointed and fed up. I felt like I'd let everyone down. I'd never had anything, go wrong on this scale before. And I just became really fed up. But something happened that I didn't expect. Where my ugly mug was on the TV the whole way around the world, people were ringing me up saying, "Hey, are you the guy I've just seen on TV? You're the guy that's been rescued, right?" I'd say, "Yeah, that's me." And they'd say, "Wow, can you come and tell your story?" And off the back of something not going my way, because obviously I didn't want to get rescued, that wasn't the plan, all of these opportunities started opening up for me. So off the back of being rescued, I ended up getting a job working on a TV show in the Amazon jungle. It was absolutely amazing. And that came off the back of something really disappointing. And I say this to young people, that there are a lot of things in life you have no control over. And you don't really have a lot of control over things when you're out in an ocean doing these types of things. And actually, inevitably, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to have times that are very disappointing. Things are going to happen to you that you don't like, that are not fair, that don't go your way. But there'll always be something good that comes off the back of something disappointing. You just won't see it at the time. You'll only see it looking back. And it was crazy. It didn't go the way I wanted it to go, but I ended up really bizarrely, I ended up benefiting off being rescued. I suppose I had a more interesting story to tell. Luckily, Ash was okay. And at some point in the future, we might look to do it again. I then carried on. I decided I was going to work on another project. Ever since I was a kid, I've been interested in flying, and I did have a fascination for helicopters, but they were just too expensive for me to learn how to fly a helicopter. Wasn't really obtainable. But I learned about gyrocopters, which look a little bit like helicopters, but they're kind of not. They operate in a completely different way. It's actually a gyroplane. The rotor is not powered. It's called auto rotation. So the only thing that's powered is your propeller at the back that provides thrust, that pushes you forward, and then air will come up underneath the rotor and cause it to spin, and it's effectively just a spinning wing. So this concept has been around literally since the Wright brothers, but with the birth of the helicopter has kind of made this type of aircraft almost redundant. It's just used for personal flying pleasure, for recreational fun. I started learning how to fly, and I was very lucky. I picked it up really quickly and I enjoyed it. And I realized that no one had flown one of these around the world, despite a few attempts. And I started looking into it, and I thought, you know what? If I break this down and I just fly one flight a day, why can't I fly this around the world? And it was really interesting because a lot of people said to me, there's no way you'll be able to fly that around the world. Just no way. But every time someone said that, it made me want it even more. Just made me that little bit more focused. And I'll tell you one thing, you've got to be able to get a good team of people around you. You've got to be able to identify who are the people to take advice from and who are the people to be polite to, but maybe not take so much advice from. Because the people who had a very small amount of experience, flying experience, were the ones that said to me, "You'll never do this. You don't know what you're doing." But here's the interesting thing. The people who had a huge amount of flying hours, that were professional pilots, they had tens of thousands of hours of flying, said to me, "You probably can do this. You just need to be mindful of this, this, and this." And again, I know I've said this before, but it really opened my mind up. Like you finding the right people to guide you and get advice from is very important. So I set off from Popham Airfield. It's not actually too far from Gosport Marina. I'd flown over Gosport Marina many times during my training and getting ready to fly around the world. Again, it was difficult to get all the money together to do this, but I managed to somehow do it. Unfortunately, Nando's didn't want to sponsor me anymore. But you know, instead of being fed up because of what they wouldn't do for me, I was grateful for what they had already given me. And I just decided that I needed to move on. And I was very lucky. I did find some other people that were able to help. So I flew over France. Then on day 3, I landed in Germany. I had to go and see one of my new sponsors, and they have much bigger planes than I do, as you can see. And they have much bigger engines as well, as you can see. After that, this was in Leipzig in Germany. After that, I flew up into Poland, which was incredible. And then from Poland, I flew into Lithuania, Estonia, and then I flew into Russia. Again, Russia was really interesting because a lot of people said to me, do not go. This was in 2019, by the way, so you certainly wouldn't be able to do it now. I was very lucky. My timing was just right. You know, a lot of people said, don't go to Russia, we'll never see you again. In my experience, the people that I was meeting, they're just normal people like you and I. They were really nice, really kind. In fact, they were constantly trying to give me gifts, although this wasn't much use, frozen fish and some whiskey. I didn't want a frozen fish and I don't really drink, so it wasn't much use, but they were just being friendly. So I carried on flying. It's an open cockpit aircraft. And it gets pretty chilly up there, but you know, you wear all the right equipment. And I wanted to speak in a school in every country I passed through. I did that when I cycled around the world. I spoke in a school in every country, spoke to 10,000 kids. When I flew around the world, I did the same. I spoke in a school in every country. And actually, even in Russia, I was speaking in schools, and I had a translator that would come in. And I have no idea what he was saying, but the kids were laughing every 5 minutes. So I hope it was good. This is about to cross the Bering Straits that separates Russia from Alaska. I flew across the Bering Straits into Alaska, down through Canada, into California. And here is the famous Golden Gate Bridge. I'd just flown over the Golden Gate Bridge and an opportunity came my way. And I say to people, everyone in life is going to get opportunity. Some will get more than others. That's just how life is. But you've got to be able to recognize something's an opportunity and you've got to be ready for it. And I'd flown over the bridge. I'd just flown around Alcatraz. I'm looking back at the bridge. The weather was beautiful, not a cloud in the sky. And I thought to myself, I'm never, ever going to be here again. I have to do this right now. So I slowed the aircraft down. I was looking where I was going, and I flew it right underneath the famous Golden Gate Bridge. It's a little bit of a gray area, but sometimes in life it's better to say sorry than it is to ask. And there was no harm done. And I'll never, ever, ever forget flying underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. It was incredible. From here, I had to work my way over to the East Coast. You all know where that is. And there's a corridor you can fly around here. It's all unrestricted. Actually, it's very, very easy to fly a light aircraft around the Statue of Liberty and up the Hudson River. And I had another aircraft join me on this day, and that's how we were able to get the what you call ship-to-ship pictures. It was amazing. From here, I had to get home, so I flew up into Canada, across to Greenland, and then from Greenland, I flew to Iceland. And then from Iceland, I flew to the Faroe Islands. And then the Faroe Islands, I flew to Scotland. And then Scotland, back down to Popham, in just on the outskirts of Basingstoke. And yeah, after 6 months of just taking it one day at a time, I'd flown a whole way around the world and I set a Guinness World Record. And, you know, when I do a lot of work with kids, they say to me, how did you do that? And could I do that? And I say, absolutely, you could. And there's a few things that I believe helped me get around the world. Firstly, I wasn't afraid to try something. You know, when people said, are you mad? I wasn't. I made a decision that I wanted to go after something. So don't be afraid to try new things. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, there'll always be someone out there that will help you, always. You might have to ask a few people to get to the right person, but you'll get there in the end. And that's what I say to kids. Don't worry about what other people are doing. If you want to try something, give it a go. And don't be afraid to ask for help. And I made a decision that I was going to take responsibility and ownership of everything. No matter what happened, I would never blame anyone else for anything going wrong. If I had problems, I was going to stay positive and I was going to own those problems and sort them out. I was never, ever going to get down, fed up, and feel sorry for myself. And I made a decision that I just was going to take it one day at a time. I wasn't going to overthink things. And the things that I can control, I'll do my best. If it's something that I can't control, then just go with the flow. And I believe those things help me get around the world. And probably the most important thing that I say to young people is, if you're going to do one thing, just treat people in a way you'd like to be treated. If you treat people in a way you'd like to be treated, you'll be all right. Most things will work out for you. You'll get the help when you need to, and you'll be okay. And when I left to fly around the world, I thought I'd bitten off far more than I could chew. I was very nervous. I was very anxious, but I'll tell you something really interesting. Everything I worried about never happened. Never happened. And actually, looking back, and I have the kind of life experience that I do now, a lot of problems were all in my own head. They were all in my own head. They really were. And when I was flying around the world, I realized something. I'd flown around the world. So I'd been around the world in the air. I'd already cycled around the world. And someone said to me, did you know that there is no human being on this planet who has circumnavigated the globe via air, sea, and land? And I thought, you know what? How can I come this far and not sail around the world? Go around the world again. I've got to do it on water. Now, it's not really possible to row around the world. And I'd already done a lot of rowing up to this point. And I made a decision. When I got back, I made a decision that I was going to sail around the world. And this has been a hell of a journey. It's taken me 3 years to get all the money together to get the boat. There it is. And again, I thought I'd bitten off more than I can chew. I've had boats before, but nothing like this. The last boat I owned was a rowing boat. And now I have a class 40. And it's funny, when I show people this picture, did you know they're more impressed that I've somehow managed to make Gosport look like Dubai? But that I'm very, very happy with my boat. And the reason I went with a class 40 is an older generation was in my budget. It's taken 3 years of asking for help to get the money to get this boat. So it hasn't come overnight. And in August last year, I was able to buy this boat. It's hull number 55. It won the Route de Rhum in 2008. It was sailed by a very famous Italian guy called Soldini. It's not a competitive boat, and it's still a fast boat, but you're not going to win races with this now. But that's okay. I'm not interested in racing. I just want to get around the world in one piece and get back. That's the most important thing. And I decided the way in which I was going to do this, I wanted it to kind of work with sharing the journey with other people, especially young people. Where I struggled so much when I was a kid, there's something that just feels right about trying to encourage kids to go out there and follow their dreams and do things they wouldn't ordinarily do and push themselves. And so I made a decision that I was going to sail around the world, but kind of have an adventure with purpose is what I call it. So on the 22nd of September, I leave Gosport. Put it in your diaries, guys, and come down. You can wave me off. I sail down to Cape Town, where I stop for 2 weeks. And in Cape Town, I go into some schools and I engage in the local communities, sharing stories, show people the boat, whoever wants to look at it. From there, I sail to Melbourne. At that point, the boat will come out of the water, the keel will be checked, and we'll have a full rig check. And just, you're halfway around the world at that point. From there, I will go into the South Pacific and round Cape Horn up to Rio. I didn't realize this, but in the sailing world, I was told that if you do not round the 3 capes, Cape of Good Hope, Cape Lewin, and Cape Horn, that it's not a true circumnavigation. Maybe some people would disagree, but I thought, you know what? I'm only going to do this once, and I'm not having anyone tell me I have not done this properly. So I'm going the full Vendée Globe route. From Rio, I go up to New York and then New York back, and I've got 8 months to get around the world. That's the window. I decided I didn't want to do it non-stop. It just makes it unnecessarily difficult, and it limits my ability to engage with other people if I'm not stopping. And I've got Starlink on the boat, which is incredible. So that's going to give me full connectivity on the boat as I'm going around the world. So that will give me the ability to stream content into schools. And so I'm going to share the geography aspect of going around the world, the different oceans. How does the weather work? The science behind it, the mindset required to do these things. And I'm also now working with the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton. I've just been made an ambassador for them. And so we're going to be looking at, I'm going to be deploying some buoys which sit under the water, and they measure the salinity and the temperature at different depths. And that data is sent back, and that data is used for forecast modeling. And their goal, the National Oceanography Centre, is to try and raise the profile within young people that it's quite important to protect the oceans, because the whole world revolves around the ocean. Everything stems from it, or the weather, everything. And so this is a really, really exciting opportunity. I still feel I've bitten off far more than I can chew, and I just take it one job at a time. I have had to completely rewire this boat. It's all had new electrics. And, you know, I found this out when I rowed across the Atlantic. You don't have to be a good rower. You don't even necessarily have to be a good sailor, but you do have to be a good electrician, a good plumber, a good carpenter, because you've got to be able to fix stuff when it breaks. You know, the RAC don't come out to where I am. So you've got to be really self-reliant. And one of the, I suppose, the way I looked at it, one of the benefits of buying a cheaper boat, because I didn't have the money to buy a boat that's ready to go around the world, is I knew I was going to have to work on it. And I thought, well, okay, that's an opportunity. Because if I'm working on the boat, when it goes wrong, well, I've done a lot of the work, so I know exactly what I'm doing. So that's what I've been doing. And I was very, very, very fortunate. I got the boat and brought it back to the UK. And someone was looking down on me because I sent an email to Premier Marinas saying, hey, this is me. This is what I'm doing. Please, can I have some help? I need somewhere to store a boat. And unbelievably, they said, okay, we'll help you. And I'm ever so grateful to the support from Premier Marinas. And actually, everyone that I've met around the marina so far has been incredibly supportive. So I guess you now all know a little bit about me, what I've been up to, and what I'm doing. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you this evening, guys. And if you would like to ask me any questions, there's nothing you can't ask me. The most common question I get is, how do you go to the toilet on the boat? It's called bucket and chuck it. So that gets that out of the way. And if you'd like to talk to me and ask me anything, please do. And I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Right, thank you so much, James. If anyone's got any questions, please do pop them in the chat. I've got some questions myself from some of the team around the office who we were talking about you earlier. They were wondering, how does preparing for this adventure compare to your previous ones?
That's a really good question. This is more technical. There's a lot more to prepare on the boat. And again, this is not so much a physical challenge. It's more of an organizational and a logistics thing. And I have actually sailed across the Atlantic as well. So I have sailing experience, not enough yet. I'm still building that. But most of this project, the stressful part of this project is getting the money. You know, so I'm the guy who's out there fundraising, trying to spin that plate. I'm also the guy who's trying to do the work on the boat. So there's a lot of different things I'm trying to do. So it's managing that workload and trying to find the right people, because it'd be very costly if the wrong people come and start, you know, doing things. And I've been very lucky actually so far. I have found good people. So yeah, this is a different project. This is probably the biggest thing I've ever worked on, actually.
And what's your biggest fear about setting off on this adventure?
My biggest fear is letting down the people that have given me the opportunity and the funding to do this. There's a lot of people have sort of said, yeah, we're not interested in this. You're crazy. But every now and then you will find someone that will believe in you. And I don't want to let those people down. And I forgot to mention this, I'm raising money for a charity called the Baton of Hope. It's a suicide prevention charity. I know a guy who he lost his son to suicide, very sad. And I couldn't imagine how bad that would be. And so he's come up with this concept of carrying a baton of hope. And I said to him, I will carry that baton of hope around the world in my boat for you to push your message and raise money for your charity. And so my biggest fear is letting down the people that have got me to this start line and are helping me. I don't want that to happen. And there are going to be thousands of kids following me. So there's a massive weight of responsibility that I'm carrying on my shoulders. And I've got to, I have that to I don't want to mess that up. So that's to answer your question.
Great. You've been preparing your class 40 at Gosport Marina. What makes it ideal for this?
Well, I'll tell you why it's ideal. Within 5 minutes, you're right out into the Solent, and do you know what? It's just a very friendly place. I've got a great spot. I've got good people around me, and the location could not be more convenient. Like it's the best location I could have had for doing what I'm doing. So, yeah, I really am grateful for the support.
And you're preparing your boat now for all these adventures ahead of you. We've had some challenging weather. What's impacted on your preparation?
The weather's not impacted my preparation. The only thing that's impacting my preparation is running out of money. That's the biggest challenge. So if anyone on this call can cut a check, and I'm just kidding, but if anyone knows anyone who might be interested in this type of thing, do let me know. That's the only problem. It's not that difficult to work on the boat. It's not that difficult. I've been out sailing with Alex Thompson's brother, David, who's an incredibly good sailor. And so like I've got things lined up. I feel like I've turned a corner. Things are coming together now. And it's just that last push for that last little bit of funding I need to ensure I'm there in September, but I'll get there. So that's my challenge. I don't have any other challenges.
And I know you're always very pleased to see people. So if anyone's in Gosport or visiting Gosport and they see you around, go and introduce
Absolutely. Come onto the boat. Yeah.
Have a look.
Absolutely.
It's always quite interesting to see how a solo sailor fits out their boat for around the world passage. So
it's very bare. It may not be a lot of people's cup of tea inside my boat.
So we really do look forward to following your adventure around the world, and with all the Starlink and all the comms we've got these days, we shouldn't have any trouble in doing so. So do keep an eye out for messages from Premier Marinas about following you around. And James will be joining us at the Southampton Boat Show in September as well. So look out for further messages about that. And I think that's probably enough. You will probably want to go and have your supper. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. There'll be plenty more stories about James coming through the Premier Marinas website and through our Facebook and Instagram and through his own. So do look out for him and his stories about how he's preparing his boat for this challenge. And have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.